Hey there, it's Duchos, and welcome to another historical ride. Today, we're diving into something that really happened, and it might just surprise you more than a pop quiz on a Saturday morning. So sit back, grab something good, and let's see what history has in store for us this time. This is Duchos history without the boring stuff. Wenceslas I, the king who didn't want to be a star. A crown in the shadows, say the name Wenceslas, and most people think of a carol or a saint on a horse. But Czech history knows more Wenceslases, and one of them was a king, a real king. Not the one from Christmas songs, but a man of flesh, blood, and silence. Wenceslas. I ruled the Czech lands in the 13th century, at a time when Mongol hordes were sweeping across Europe, when knightly orders tried to claim half the continent, and when royal crowns could be lost faster than a horseshoe in the mud. And Wenceslas? He answered everything with a hunting bow and calm. He wasn't weak, he just didn't want to be the center of attention. In a land where every noble thirsted for power and every neighboring ruler hungered for war, Wenceslas chose a different strategy: survival. Keeping the country running, not dazzling but not collapsing either, and that's exactly why history forgot him. Because he didn't write it with fire and sword, he simply held the line. And sometimes that takes more strength than we realize. Born to rule, made to wait, Wenceslas. I was born around the year 1205 into the Přemyslid dynasty, an ancient Czech house that had led the country for centuries, but had only recently gained true royal prestige. His father, Přemysl Otakar I, was one of the most influential men of his era. He negotiated a hereditary royal title for Bohemian rulers, something rare in medieval Europe. His mother, Constance of Hungary, was noble, devout, and politically astute. It was probably from her that Wenceslas inherited his caution, reserve, and calm nature. He wasn't one for tribunals or crowds. He preferred to observe, think, and wait for his moment. As a young man, he was granted the title Margrave of Moravia, a governor of a vast region. It was a trial by fire. He had to manage land, settle disputes among nobles, and collect taxes. And he handled it without scandal. In 1228, he was crowned king of Bohemia, even while his father was still alive. This wasn't a whim but a strategic move. Přemysl Otakar wanted to ensure a smooth transfer of power after his death. But even after the coronation, young Wenceslas played more of a watcher than a ruler. Real power remained with his father. So while the world knew King Přemysl, Wenceslas sat quietly in the background. And maybe it was then he realized, not every ruler needs to shout to be heard. The hunter, not the diplomat. While other kings collected titles, minted coins, and declared wars, Wenceslas preferred to rise early and head into the woods. With his falcon, his horse, and silence. He loved hunting, not just as a pastime, it was a passion, an escape, maybe even a way to keep his sanity in a world where politics was more survival game than statecraft. At court, rumors swirled that the king trusted deer more than people. But the truth was, Wenceslas wasn't incompetent, just different. He didn't rule by force, but by balance. He didn't want to build an empire, he wanted to keep his kingdom from falling apart. And in an age when the world was burning, that wasn't a bad plan. He wasn't a reformer or a revolutionary, but he had a feel for order. He saw the potential of growing towns, supported the founding of new settlements, especially along the borders. Many Czech and Moravian towns that exist today began under his reign, not because of grand vision, but because of the quiet stability he maintained. One defining moment of his rule came when he expelled the Teutonic Knights. They had originally been invited to defend the frontier, but instead of gratitude they built their own power base and a shadow state. Wenceslas didn't wait for them to become enemies. In 1230 he simply told them to leave. No war, no drama, just thank you, now go. That was who he was. He knew when to act and when to remain silent. A king who wouldn't hold press conferences today, but would still get results. Wenceslas ruled like a forest, unflashy but solid. He didn't shine, but he stood firm. And in times of chaos, that might just be the greatest royal skill of all. The Mongol threat in 1241, the earth shook, and not figuratively. Mongol armies led by Batu Khan tore through Eastern Europe. Kiev fell. Poland burned. Hungary lay in ruins. Thousands of riders, unknown tactics, terrifying speed. And their direction west, toward Bohemia, Wenceslas had to act quickly. These weren't just another wave of raiders. They were warriors from another world, literally. They spoke a different language, fought with unfamiliar methods, and above all, won, everywhere. European kings were stunned, and when Henry II the Pious, Duke of Silesia, fell at Legnica, all of Central Europe panicked. Wenceslas mobilized his army. He didn't panic, but he prepared. As news spread that the Mongols might enter Bohemia, the king did something unexpected. He rode out to meet them. He led his forces to the Silesian border, ready to act or at least send a clear message. Not this way, but the battle never came. The Mongols turned back, probably due to word of the Great Khan's death in faraway Mongolia. They had to return. Europe exhaled. And Wenceslas? He came home without a scratch, but with the image of a king who had protected his land without spilling a drop of blood. Later, the story turned to legend. Some chronicles claim that the Czech army had defeated the Mongols. Others whispered about secret diplomacy. The truth, no one really knows. But one thing is certain, when Europe bled, the Czech lands stood. And maybe that's why his son, Přemysl Otakar II, even got the chance to become who he was. And speaking of history, let me introduce a sponsor that feels like it stepped straight out of a medieval chronicle. It's called Wolfland, and if you're into fantasy, Celtic art, Viking jewelry, or just want a sword that's more than a wall decoration, this is the place for you. But it's more than just a store. Wolfland is the official partner for Kingdom Come: Deliverance 2. Yes, really. You can even get the legendary Invictus sword, the very one from the game, forged for the real world. I've partnered with Wolfland because they're not only passionate about quality craftsmanship, they also support creators like me, who bring history to life. So if you want to support them and support this channel, check out wolfland.com. And don't forget to use the code DUCHOS05 at checkout. You'll get 5% off and help keep the past alive. Thanks a lot. And now, let's dive back into history. A war between father and son. Every king expects betrayal, but few expect it from their own son. Přemysl Otakar II had everything Europe admired. He was handsome, confident, ambitious. But Wenceslas had once had another son, and he had died. Vladislav, Wenceslas's firstborn, was meant to inherit the crown. He was young, promising, educated, and deeply loved. His death around 1247 shattered Wenceslas. Not as a ruler, he still wore the crown, but as a man, he began to withdraw, into himself, into silence, and then came the rebellion. Přemysl, the younger son, seized the moment. Backed by nobles, he took Prague and declared himself the new master. Wenceslas was left outside, literally. He camped beyond the city walls, besieging his own capital. And he asked for just one thing, to be let in. Not for the throne, for his wife. Queen Constance, the woman he had loved for decades, lay dying. Wenceslas wanted to see her one last time, to say goodbye, but Přemysl refused him. It was more than personal humiliation, it was the end of an era. Wenceslas realized he wouldn't win this fight, and maybe didn't want to. In time he and Přemysl reconciled, but the scar remained. No gestures, no apology. Just silence. The kind Wenceslas had known his whole life, and maybe that's why he never fully ruled again. Maybe that was the moment he truly stepped away. He remained king in name. But in truth, he had already become something else. A man in the shadows. The one-eyed king. The Middle Ages had no mercy. A king could be the most powerful man in the land and still lose everything in a heartbeat. In Wenceslas' case, it happened during his favorite pastime, hunting, a cursed branch. Maybe his own carelessness. The result? He lost an eye. From that moment, people called him the One-Eyed King. And while that might sound poetic, For Wenceslas it was just another step into the dark. He had already lived outside the spotlight. Now it was as if the world itself faded. Physically, he remained strong, he still reigned, but mentally, emotionally, he retreated. He withdrew from court. Przemysl gradually took over more duties, and Wenceslas let him. Maybe because he saw a better king in his son, maybe because he no longer had the will to fight. Or maybe because the pain of losing one son, being betrayed by the other, losing his wife, and losing part of his sight was simply too deep. He didn't stop being king, but he became a symbol. An old man with a crown that now felt heavier than ever. He died in 1253 without fanfare, quietly, just as he had lived. And yet, he left behind a country that had survived the Mongols, endured civil war, and was ready for greatness. Maybe he saw the world through one eye, but maybe he saw farther than those with both. A legacy without legends. Wenceslas first wasn't the kind of king sung about in ballads. He didn't lead glorious crusades. He didn't build cathedrals that scraped the skies. He never earned titles like the Great, the Golden, or the Saint. His name wasn't carved into the shields of history. It stayed beneath them. And yet, he was one of the most important kings of his time. His reign was like a bridge, quiet, solid, and subtle. He connected the reign of the great Przemysl Otakar I with the rise of the even greater Przemysl Otakar II. Without him, neither would be remembered as they are today. He maintained stability while Central Europe trembled. When other kings fell to Mongol blades, Wenceslas kept his kingdom untouched. When others died in battle, he lived to see peace. His rule wasn't dazzling, but it was steady. It wasn't heroic, but it was deeply human. And maybe that's why so many have forgotten him. History tends to love extremes, warriors, saints, conquerors, not the men who ruled quietly without needing to shine, but it's often those kings who form the backbone of a kingdom. And Wenceslas was exactly that, a pillar in the storm. He didn't leave behind myths, but he left behind a kingdom. And sometimes that's more than a crown. It's proof that true strength doesn't need to shout, it just needs to hold. The king who stood firm, Wenceslas I, never wanted to be a legend. And maybe that's why he survived where others fell. He didn't chase fame, he didn't build a cult of personality. He understood that sometimes all you can do is endure. Stand in the pain, keep your balance, and keep walking, even when the world begins to break. His life was not easy. He lost a son, lost his sight, was betrayed by his own child, then lost his wife and wasn't even allowed to say goodbye, and still he didn't break. He ruled quietly but firmly. He didn't dazzle, but he endured. And maybe that's more than enough. Today, few speak of him. He's not in school books. There are no city squares bearing his name. But if you look closely at Czech history, you'll see his shadow in the things that didn't fall, in what survived, in the kingdom that endured while the rest of the continent burned. And maybe that's his true greatness, not in what he built, but in what he held together. Thanks for watching all the way through. If you liked the video, drop a like, hit that subscribe button, and feel free to share it. It really helps others who care about history too. Let me know in the comments what you'd like to see next, and if you enjoyed this one. Take care, and I'll catch you in the next video.